Thank you for coming this afternoon. I'm going to do a brief introduction of both of you, if that's okay. Jenna Miara is a proud alum of NPS, the mom of 2 current students, and a graduate of Columbia College and Stanford Law School. As a public interest lawyer, policy advocate, and nonprofit leader, Jenna knows how to bring communities together to solve tough problems and make systems stronger. She is the executive director of the Massachusetts IOLTA Committee, which funds civil legal aid programs across Massachusetts. Welcome, Jenna.
Thank you, Amy.
Ben Schlesinger was born and raised in Newton, graduating from Newton North in 1998. He has lived in Waban since 2016 with his wife and 2 children, who now attend Zerbis and Oak Hill. Ben has an MBA from MIT and consults with startups. Welcome, Ben.
Thanks, Amy. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Okay, we'll start. According to the 4 Area Council survey, which they conducted earlier this year, Newton residents are most concerned with how our city is managed and how those decisions affect our public schools. They cited issues of curriculum standards, safety, transportation, and teacher compensation. But above all, they asked how we can sustain educational excellence. These are engaged Newton voters participating in this election. So let's begin with some of top-of-mind issues. Could you first describe how you are different from your opponent as it relates to your future actions and goals on the school committee if you're elected? I'll start with you.
Thanks, Amy. So as many people know, we're going to have a huge amount of turnover on school committee next year. 6 of the 8 elected seats are open, and we're also going to have a new mayor. So we'll have 7 new folks on school committee next year. I think that makes it extra important that we have people in those positions who are ready to do the job and be effective from day one. I think what differentiates me from my opponent is that I have directly relevant experience in my professional life that will allow me to do that. I've spent my career in public service, working with communities to solve hard problems together. I have a lot of experience overseeing diverse organizations that are serving communities as a whole, and nonprofit budgets, which have a lot of similarities with school district budgets. I also, and this is of particular importance for the upcoming school committee term, I have a lot of experience working productively with unions. The 2 large nonprofits where I've worked have both been unionized, and I have experiences being both in a union and on the employer side of things.
Thank you. Ben?
Yeah. I have a lot of experience managing large organizations and big money decisions. I have an MBA from MIT. I've been a consultant in the beginning parts of my career. I've worked at technology startups as a senior executive. I've managed executives. I've served on boards. I know about thinking, how do we use a $300 million budget and understand and measure, are we getting our dollars worth? Are we doing the things that we set out to do when we established our goals for the year? And I know how to manage the folks who we entrust with making those decisions and with leading the organization. It's a big decision, and I think that confidence in me is why of the 19 city councilors who've endorsed in this race, 18 of them have endorsed me, and of the 7 school committee members, 6 of them have endorsed me.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I'd just like to add on the subject of endorsements. I'm proud to have the endorsements of many, many community leaders in Newton and many former school committee members. I didn't come into this race with any political connections. Many of the elected officials who have chosen to endorse my opponent did so without giving me the chance to talk with them and explain to them what I would bring to the table as a member of school committee.
Ben, would you like to follow up?
No, I'm good, Amy. Thank you.
Okay. Well, since we mentioned some of the current school committee candidates, all of the current school committee candidates have criticized the various parties' tone and communications during the 2024 Newton teachers' strike. The current NTA contract will expire during the next school committee's term. If there's another strike, how should the school committee act differently next time than it did in 2024? I'll start with you, Ben.
By the time we get to a strike, we've blown it, right? We've messed up. And I think that what everybody agrees on is that it's the period before that needs to change. There needs to be more flexibility. There needs to be more listening. There needs to be less posturing. There needs to be a sense that we all want the same thing. We all want to get to the same place, and that's avoiding the strike. If we wind up there, my view is that you need to minimize the amount of public rhetoric and criticism, because whatever happens during the strike, we're all going to be together the day after the strike. The teachers are going to be teaching our children. The school committee is going to be the school committee. The administrators are going to be here. And so we need to figure out, how do we maintain a tone of respect and mutual admiration that allows us to preserve that sense of community.
Jenna?
I agree with Ben that we want to start the work long before we get anywhere close to an expired contract, work to rule, or God forbid, another strike. And I'm glad to see the current school committee is taking some steps in that direction with good support from Dr. Nolan. I also agree that we need to approach members of all of the unions who work within our schools with a level of good faith and respect, and everyone needs to come to the table looking for compromises that are in the best interests of our students. I'm concerned, though, that the level of antagonism and negative rhetoric that's been going on in this campaign, including by many who support my opponent, is going to make that quite difficult. He's received an endorsement from an organization that just sent out a robocall criticizing the president of the union and blaming him for the strike. I think that's not the kind of example we want to be setting. If we say that we want to come to the table and work collaboratively, we need to really walk that walk, not just talk that talk, and that includes how we conduct ourselves during the campaign.
Ben, would you like to rebut that?
I'll only say I can't speak for everybody who supports me. A lot of people support me, and I agree with many of them on many things, and I disagree with many of them on many things too. How they behave, to the extent that I know who they are, and I think Jenna's talking about an anonymous group that I haven't figured out yet. I expect people to behave in a respectful way towards everybody involved in this.
I would just add, if you don't know who a group is, I probably wouldn't accept their endorsement. And if you do accept their endorsement and they're running ads all over social media with that endorsement and you disagree with a robocall they've sent up, it might be a good idea to speak out so the community knows you don't tolerate that kind of disrespect towards our teachers.
So I haven't accepted their endorsement. They endorsed me unsolicited and never have contacted me. So, I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to do about that.
So, let's see. I have a sort of a list of questions, but since you brought the issue up of social media and what's going on in social media, this has been a rather heated campaign. What do you see the role of social media in the schools committee's communication to the public? You already mentioned the role of various parties who are endorsing or not endorsing certain candidates, but what about the school committee's role in terms of social media? And I'll start with you, Jenna.
Sure. I think the school committee needs to do a much better job communicating with all segments of the Newton community in all sorts of different ways. And I do think, while imperfect, social media is one of the ways to do that. So I would like to see the school committee reinvigorate its communication subcommittee and really work together to think about ways to communicate transparent, clear, actionable information out to the community about what's going on in our schools, both celebrating the successes and being straightforward about the challenges and what we're doing to meet that. When it comes to social media, there's risks and there's benefits. And so I think all I can do on social media is be transparent and straightforward and honest and try to encourage others to be the same.
Ben?
Yeah, I think that's right. It's important that the school committee is positive in the tone. And I think that as far as the channels they use, it should be in all of the above, right? There's a whole menu of ways that they can communicate. I would encourage the next mayor to allow them access to the email list that the mayor has, which I think I have heard rumors that it's 40,000 emails, it's some huge number of emails. I think it's important that we get out to more citizens more effectively. One of the things that happens, and if you're not a parent, you may not know, parents kind of get overwhelmed with the amount of communication from the schools. A lot of it is very good and very helpful, but we spend a lot of time reading a lot of emails, and the parents tend to miss stuff that comes from the school committee. So the more channels we have to access it, the better, and social media is one of those channels that might help us get to more people.
So, but how would you use social media? Not just about what's going on in the schools, but would you use it as a tool? I mean, we're obviously facing some pretty tough times coming up for the city, whether it's for the municipal budget or the school budget. So would you see social media as a tool to help better inform residents about the state of affairs in the school committee? And then how would you figure out who gets to send that message if there is not consensus on the school committee? I'll start with you, Ben.
I think the social media is a difficult platform to communicate a complex message, right? So you're probably going to use it to try to drive audience to another place. Maybe it's to a forum that you hold here, like the superintendent did at Oak Hill in the spring. or maybe it's to a presentation that you put together or to a website that you've built. I've been a chief marketing officer, so I have thoughts that I'm trying to simplify for this, but you go where you use the language in the location that it speaks to that audience, right? So if you're trying to speak to social media audience, you're probably talking to more younger voters, right? And you try to figure out what's going to compel them to click your button or to go to your event. And I think that it's about getting the ideas in front of them. I honestly concern myself a little less with how. We just need to get them engaged and get them to understand what we're trying to tell them.
Jenna?
I would hope that if the school committee were able to reinvigorate the communication subcommittee, they could certainly agree on some fairly low-hanging fruit, like we should be announcing all school committee meetings in advance with really clear directions about how people access the Zoom link, how they make public comment, how they find the Ed Center, how they get to the room where the school committee meeting is being heard. I think all of those can be barriers to people who are interested in participating to participating. If you haven't been to a meeting before, it can be scary to go for the first time. I've done a lot of community engagement around all sorts of types of community meetings, from tiny church basements to the LA Board of Supervisors, and I really think that kind of just clear and transparent communication about this is what we're doing, this is how you can participate, and this is how we would like to receive your feedback. I think social media works really well for that and should be a very uncontroversial use of it by the school committee.
But on the topic of communication and on how the school committee operates, I've noticed that parents have been critical of the way meetings are run, mostly because public comment has been limited to, say, 2 minutes, and then there's no follow-up afterwards. Do you have a suggestion on how to better either run the meetings or how to follow up with parents who do have the time or take the time to share their concerns with the school committee?
I do have thoughts. Thanks for the question. So first, I think it would be worthwhile to consider extending the time limit on the public comments. It's very short right now. I think an extra minute or two might help people express themselves more clearly without feeling rushed. I have a lot of experience with public meetings, as I'm sure you know, Amy. There are rules about what can be discussed at a public meeting, and it's limited to what's on the pre-published agenda. So that's the very wonky reason why, in the moment, school committee members can't respond to particular issues that were raised during the public comment period if they weren't already on the agenda. It's important to follow that rule. That rule, however, does not and should not prevent school committee members from following up with the person who gave that public comment, learning more from them, sharing responses, and bringing it back on the agenda to the next school committee meeting if it's something the entire community would benefit from hearing.
So that's something that you would promote?
Absolutely.
Ben?
Yeah, Amy, I think that the school committee meetings can be long and very detailed and in-depth, and they do have preset agendas, and it's difficult to hold off-the-agenda conversations. I think it seems a little odd when people make an impassioned 3-minute statement and the school committee seemingly ignores them and moves on. So I agree that allowing some questioning to pull a little bit more detail out or fill in blanks makes sense. I think that responding should happen offline, and I know that my intention is to make sure that for everybody who comes to public comment, they get an email back from somebody on the school committee saying, we heard you, we understand, here is something of a thought or a response to what you said. It should not be you go in, you scream into the wind, and then you go home with nothing for it. I also think it's important, the school committee's email address is public. You can reach out to the entire school committee by email. It's another way you can communicate with them.
Did you have a follow-up?
Just that if it's not on the agenda, it simply can't be discussed, and so it's always worthwhile to explain that, but that rule can't be bent. So there can't be a back and forth during that school committee meeting. It has to be dealt with at a subsequent meeting.
Right.
Okay. I'm going back to my set questions. Chris Bresky, the current school committee chair, has made NPS budget transparency, including setting an NPS allocation baseline of $296 million, which in his view reflects true cost rather than the current $292 million, as a public priority of his. However, a larger direct allocation to NPS instead of a lower amount supplemented by one-time free cash and stabilization fund disbursements, as is done now, may reduce the city's flexibility in making allocations and potentially impact its AAA bond rating, which relies on various accounting ratios on paper. Is transparency or flexibility in collaborating with the mayor's office more important to you? I don't remember who I started with. Let's go with Ben.
Is transparency or flexibility more important in collaborating with the mayor's office?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you packed a lot into that one, Amy. They are both extremely important. We need to have a school committee and a mayor that get along and find ways to solve problems better than we have had in the last few years. All of the budget wonking out that you just talked about, I think we can thread the needle by looking at the pension. I don't know if the pension board would be, if the retirement board would be open to extending the timeline. We're currently funding a pension through 2031. The state law says we have to fund it by 2040. I think we should look at bonding it, which is an idea that Chris has dived really deeply into. Chris has supported me, and he's been very helpful to me in the campaign. He's read me in on how this would work. I think there are opportunities there to free up a lot of cash in the near term and to work with the mayor's office to, to communicate how we want that to happen. And hopefully find a result that helps everybody.
Jenna?
I think all of Newton is anxious for the school's budget and the city budget in general to move out of the crisis loop that it's been in for the last 5 or 6 years. It's been frankly quite scary to be a Newton resident and a parent of kids in school and hear that there might be 30 teachers laid off before the next school year and then be left in limbo for several months as the school committee and the mayor debate what the allocation should be. So I want us to move out of the crisis loop. And I think one way to do that is through transparent, zero-based budgets of the sort that Dr. Nolan and her team built last year that really let us see what are the needs of the schools and then gave the school committee the important task of advocating to make sure those needs are met. When it comes to that advocacy, I wouldn't say the mayor and the school committee need to get along. I would say they need to be partners, they need to collaborate, but the school committee's job is to advocate for the needs of the students and the schools, not be friends with the mayor. It is the mayor's job to figure out how to find that money within the city budget so our schools remain excellent. And the school committee members can be partners in that, can advocate, can suggest, but they play different roles, and it's important to keep that in mind when we're talking about the budget.
So, but in terms of the flexibility, what was important, I think, in the last, at least this last budget cycle, was looking at use of one-time free cash, which for many reasons is not ideal to use.
Yes.
And also looking at the stabilization fund. So do you think that having those in the sort of the back pocket, if you have tight budgets, is something that you are open to utilize and advocate and work with the mayor on? Or do you think we should expand our scope of possibilities and look at an override?
I think the second. So a mediocre solution, a short-term solution is better than no solution, and I was glad to see that the mayor and the school committee were able to access those one-time only funds. As someone who's worked in the nonprofit space for a long time, one-time only funds are a little bit of a poison pill. They get you through the current year, but they actually make the problem for the next year even harder because now you have a bigger hole in the base budget that you have to dig your way out of. So kudos to everybody who made it work for this year so we weren't laying off 30 teachers, but that's not the cycle we want to get into for budgeting. So I think we need to be realistic about what are the other sources of raising revenue, continuing to look for efficiencies within the school district, although I don't think there are a lot left to find, but we should keep looking, and then exploring things like private funding, grant making, and of course an override, which I think we very well may need in the next several years to keep our schools excellent.
Ben?
Yeah, that's all correct. I agree with that. And that's why I'm pushing for rethinking the pension financing obligation, right? That's the opportunity. We're spending $50 million this year financing this pension. If we can extend the timeline on that and cut that down to 35 or 40 a year, that frees up all the money we need to solve this problem and deal with other problems, and it frees it up in a sustainable way, not a one-time way, right? So I think that's where having background in finance and being able to dive into these numbers and try to solve these problems is important. The override question is going to come back at us, I think, at some point, and it's very simple. We're living in a cost of living crisis in the city. It is too expensive to live in Newton. If we pass an override, we raise people's taxes. I will probably support it because I think we probably needed the last one. I voted for the last one, and I think we probably will need another one. But it's our job. It's incumbent on the school committee. It'll be incumbent on the mayor to pull every other lever first before going to the taxpayers and asking them to pay more taxes.
Jenna, do you want to respond?
I agree with that. I think an override should neither be the first solution or the only solution to Newton's budget crisis, but I think it may be a tool that we're going to need to deploy. And so I think it's really a yes and situation. We need to be talking to people consistently and clearly starting now about what's happening in our schools, why they cost what they cost, and what we need to keep them excellent so that we have primed the pump, as you say, for an override if that becomes necessary. And we need to be continuing to look at all sorts of other ideas, including the pension, which I agree is also a good idea. It's not one the school committee has any ability to control, or frankly, even city council. It's up to a separate retirement board. So we should advocate for them to make a change, but we also need to be working on other avenues of getting the schools the revenues they need.
Did you want to follow up?
I would just reiterate my point. I think that if the retirement board is not willing to move, then we should look at privately bonding it, where we take out effectively a mortgage and pay it down. We have the bank pay down the pension liability, and then we pay the bank back over an extended period of time.
So I just wanted to go back to the idea of going to the retirement board. I believe the last time it was the mayor that went to the retirement board. So going back to the question about collaborating with the mayor, should there be at least that ability to work with the mayor when it's really tight, and perhaps that is one of the ways that we really want to do work out our financial situation by having the mayor go to advocate, because as you mentioned, the school committee really can't do that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think in a perfect world, the mayor and the school committee are rowing in the same direction when it comes to freeing up the monies we need to keep our schools the way we want them to be. And I hope we'll get to a point with the new mayor where we're able to do that.
Yeah, as an executive, I tell my people, come to me. If you come to me with a problem, that's okay. We'll try to fix the problem together. If you come to me with a problem and a solution, now we're getting somewhere, because you're giving me something I can say yes to, and you're giving us somewhere to go. So when I go to the mayor and I say we need more money, I'd like to go to him with more than that. I'd like to say we need more money, and here's a plan to get it that should satisfy all of your criteria. Take as much of the work off of his plate, her plate as we can, and get to the answer that we need.
So what I'm hearing from both of you is that an override could be in the near future, but not necessarily right away. Is that pretty much your assessment? Is that an accurate assessment of what I'm hearing?
I think from a financial standpoint for the schools, the sooner the better when it comes to an override is my honest answer. I think from a political point of view, with a new mayor and with an override that failed just a couple of years ago, and with the amount of division and upset we're seeing in the community around schools, I think the next year or two may not politically be the right time to go to the voters with that kind of ask. But I think, as I said before, we need to be continually laying the groundwork so that if we do need to pull the lever of putting an override on the ballot, we have an informed and educated electorate who understand what the funds are for and why they're needed.
Yeah, we should spend the first year of the next administration figuring out what other levers we can pull, and freeing up as much money as we can in other ways, and building hopefully positive political capital for the mayor, so that after that, if the override is the answer, the mayor would be able to go and try to get one.
In a recent Newton Teachers Association bulletin to its members, NTA President Mike Zillis quoted an elementary educator as saying, "I have to reconcile myself to the fact that Newton is no longer a place where we teach students, but rather one where we teach curriculum." Do you agree or disagree with that statement, and why? Jenna?
Well, I think that there is certainly some truth to that statement. I think in an admirable effort to ensure that we have more consistency across grade levels and across schools in our very large Newton system of schools, Dr. Nolan and her team have put a lot of emphasis on curriculum being implemented with fidelity, and that's important. We want to make sure that a sixth grader at Brown is getting the same math curriculum as a sixth grader at Bigelow. It's important for our systems and for our students and the equity that it worked that way. I think there are some ways in which we may have gone a little too far in that, and we've taken away the really important autonomy and independence that teachers, who are the expert educators in our district, need to be able to teach the children in front of them to the best of their abilities.
Ben?
When the head of the union has a concern like that, we need to listen. We need to understand what it is. I would want to talk to Mike and understand more about what he's saying, because my experience in this building is that the teachers taught my students. They taught my now third grader and my now sixth grader, and they did it phenomenally well. and I think that they showed care and compassion, and they pushed the children, and I see that continuing today in this building and over at Oak Hill. And there's a pretty serious problem, I think, that it's understood across the system that 6th grade and 9th grade are especially hard grades to teach in the city, because those are the years when kids feed in from different schools and they all come in with different knowledge and they've all learned different things on the way up. That doesn't make sense. We should be at a place where you can trust that the Zervis kid, the Memorial Spalding kid, and the Bowen kid who get to Oak Hill in 6th grade all have the same kind of baseline behind them.
Do you have a follow-up?
No.
The MCAS has recently been removed as a statewide graduation requirement. Should Newton install a local version of a district-wide assessment test as a graduation requirement? I'll start with you, Ben.
We should have something objective. I don't know if it's a single test or a sequence of tests or what, but there should be some sort of objective assessment for a few reasons. One of them is to take the burden off of the educators. If all we're saying is that it's educator grades, we've set up a situation where the pressure from parents toward the educators to pass kids is not going to be healthy for our relationships, and it's not going to be great for what the educators are looking for. I think we also need to think about the value of a Newton diploma. It needs to mean something. It needs to mean something standardized has been accomplished. Of course, there have to be accommodations for people with special needs. We had those before. You put together a portfolio of work over a period of time, and that checked the box here. Almost nobody in Newton, very, very few kids, did not pass the MCAS requirement before. We should get back to a system where that's the case again, and we have something objective telling us that.
Jenna?
I think the statewide decision to remove MCAS as a graduation requirement is a really exciting opportunity for a district like Newton to develop its own set of bespoke graduation pathways and assessments so that graduation is accessible to all Newton students, so that the Newton diploma has value, but that we're not basing all of that value on one high-stakes test, which requires a lot of time and energy to be spent teaching toward that test, which is one of the reasons the voters overall in Massachusetts, I think, rejected the MCAS as a continuing graduation requirement. I think we should look at the really wonderful portrait of a learner that NPS came out with last year, think about those core competencies, and figure out objective ways to assess that all of our graduating seniors have met those core competencies. I don't think we need to have one high-stakes test to do that. We assess students all the time throughout their school careers in Newton, and that's great, but I don't think we need a test to be a graduation requirement.
So what are your, so you mentioned portrait of a learner as one type of way to look at students and evaluate whether the students have what they need to be successful. Is there anything other outside of that you would also include?
I mean, I think we would look at the full picture of Newton's educational goals and values and develop, and I've heard Dr. Nolan talk about this. She seems optimistic and frankly kind of excited at the opportunity to craft graduation requirements in Newton that really match what makes our district special and have our students feel good about the diploma when they receive it. I'll also say there's only a tiny handful of states at this point that still use a single high-stakes test as a graduation requirement. So the other 45 states have figured out ways, including New York and California, to have their diplomas be meaningful without basing it off of a high-stakes test. So I have every confidence that working with the school committee, Dr. Nolan and her team can figure out a way to do that. Ben?
Yeah, so Newton voters actually voted to keep the MCAS requirement in the city. We don't get to do that. That's not how it works. It was a statewide vote, but I think people do expect that the idea of providing the ability to thrive and the excellent education is something that we can measure along the way. It doesn't have to mean a single high-stakes test, but it means there's something objective that isn't just putting all the pressure on educators to subjectively test it.
So tomorrow night, there's a school committee meeting, and one of the subjects they'll be discussing is this new enrollment report that has come out. We have seen that there's been a 6% decline during COVID, and we're also seeing that I think this report is going to suggest that it's even a further drop than we had originally anticipated. How should the school committee address the decline in enrollment, and what do you think is the reason for the decline right now? I'll start with you, Ben.
So Dr. Nolan has done a bunch of work, and in the spring she reported some of that work out. You have to start by asking the why. What's the root cause? So she went out and she did focus groups and interviews with families that had left the system. And I think that we know that the perception that we lost our edge academically is one of the major things. I think that she's working hard. I think that measuring how students are performing and then being transparent about that with the parents, providing us with, now it's 3-star reports a year, is really helpful to give the parents a sense of confidence that we know what our child is doing inside the building and how they're progressing, and if there's something they need to work on or something they're already good at. There's a whole laundry list of other problems. She noted that people of certain religions weren't feeling safe in our schools, and that's really disturbing. We need to figure out how to make sure that every student that comes into Newton Public Schools feels safe here and doesn't go home saying they might need to go to private school to ensure their safety.
Jenna?
I agree that we need our schools to be excellent and innovative and safe and welcoming to all students, to encourage as many families for whom it's the right choice to send their students to Newton Public Schools. And there was a peak in the enrollment decline during COVID, and we have brought many of those families back into the school district, and I think that's wonderful. There are also some demographic trends in our city and in particular neighborhoods that can't be ignored, and that has caused several elementary schools in particular to fall to such a low level of student enrollment that it is difficult for teachers to do their best teaching. They can't collaborate across grade levels. It can be socially isolating for students. It's hard to implement important initiatives like MTSS when you have a very small school and teacher population. I think we need to be ready to look at the data and make hard decisions about whether there needs to be a combining or reorganizing of some of our schools to respond to some of the demographic trends that we're seeing.
I'm glad you brought that up because that was my next follow-up. So because there seems to be an enrollment issue, particularly in 2 North Side schools, Ward and Underwood, what in terms of neighborhood schools, right? A lot of people move to Newton for the neighborhood experience. How would you address or look at that issue before making a determination or recommendation to the city?
Well, I think what makes a neighborhood school is a sense of community. And I do think it's possible to build a sense of community even when students are not necessarily walking or biking to school. I'll just give myself as an example. As when I started at Ainger Elementary School, it was the year after Hamilton and Lower Falls had closed. And so a number of my classmates lived in Lower Falls, which is not walkable or bikeable to Ainger. We still had a wonderful, robust community of families at that school. My kindergarten classmates from Lower Falls continue to be 2 of my best friends to this day. And so we built a community without the ability to walk and bike. Not to diminish the importance of that, but sometimes we have to realize that we've reached a point where perhaps the benefits of having a neighborhood school are outweighed by the challenges of having a school with such low enrollment that I referenced before. So we need to be able to really look at the data and make hard decisions when it's in the best interests of our students. I was surprised that my opponent, who talks quite a lot about looking at data, told the Newton Beacon that even if the data supported it, he had no position on whether certain elementary schools should be closed. I think that's frankly putting your head in the sand. You got to make the tough decisions when it's good for our students and good for our schools.
Ben?
So the question was asked as a hypothetical, and I don't see a lot of use of engaging in hypotheticals that haven't been well defined or explained in a single sentence. So here's the way I would think about it. We need to do the best we can to look in our crystal ball. And we know a few things, speaking of data. We know that we have a report from a demographer that says that seniors are going to be moving out of single-family homes in Newton, and families are going to be moving into them. That makes sense when you think about the timing of the baby boomer generation that still lives here. We think that that's going to be playing out relatively quickly. We need to see if that happens. We know that private school enrollment went from a traditional 18-19% up to 25% during COVID, and now back to 22. We need to see if we can drive that back down to 18 or 19%. That's hundreds of kids that will be coming back into the district. If we start doing those things, then we stop having these questions about are the schools at critical mass to function. If that doesn't happen and the schools aren't at critical mass, then that leads us in one direction. If they are, it leads us in another. We also have to look at the cost benefit of the spend. Countryside is going to cost us $76 million, right? So it's probably not going to be practical to rebuild 2 entirely new schools, but there are ways we could get creative. We could think about what are we doing with pre-K. We could think about a variety of different things to balance it out. What we know for certain is that closing neighborhood schools is bad for the neighborhoods, and the neighbors remember it, and they remember the trauma of having their local schools closed, and so we have to be very, very thoughtful before we decide to go down that path.
Did you want to respond?
I agree it's a hard decision and not one to be taken lightly, but I also think those school communities deserve some certainty. They've been really stuck in limbo for over a decade as their schools have gone on and off the list for being modernized and renovated. Students benefit from modern facilities, and that's not what we have right now at Ward and Underwood. I've had conversations with teachers, students, families at both of those schools, and they are really suffering in certain ways from the lack of modern facilities. So we can't keep waiting and waiting forever to see if things might change in a particular way. I think part of the job of any leader is to make hard decisions that benefit the community by centering students and their experiences. I feel confident that we'll come up with solutions that work for everybody, that maintain a really lovely community feeling around these schools, but also get us right-sized schools and modern facilities that all of our students can benefit from.
No follow-up.
No, I'm fine. Thanks, Amy.
Okay. The only thing that I would say is that I think also on tomorrow's agenda, they're looking at the Ward Underwood situation, and the current school committee has already come up with a time frame. So I think that will be top on your plates.
So yes and no. They are starting a community-based engagement process, which is exactly what we should be doing. They have committed to Ward especially, and I don't remember where they left the conversation with that word, that for a 5-year period, they're not going to do anything significant. That was about a year and a half ago now. So in the next term, there should be continued community engagement and discussion and problem solving. There should be continued work with the demographers and understanding what the data and the trends and the fact patterns look like. But it's, we've made a commitment for a 4-year period, and I would intend to uphold the commitment that was made to those families.
But doesn't that go to the issue that Jenna raised about dragging our feet and not giving the students sort of the resources that they need, whether it's the modern facilities or some sort of, comfort level of where to move forward? And isn't that also a drain on our financial situation?
Yes and yes.
Okay.
These things take a very long time to do. So along the way, you have to go through a very extensive process because you look for state funding and you have to fill out applications for the state funding, and you have to go through a process. So I think that we were talking about opening a door. Dr. Nolan was talking about 2033 or 2034 as an opening date of the school. So the next school committee will be taking steps along that path to figure out what it is that we're proposing before the state. They will not, I don't think, in those 2 years make a go or no-go decision on anything.
You set? Mm-hmm. Well, now it's time for closing statements. So since we started with Jenna first, at the beginning, we'll go with you, Ben.
Thanks, Amy. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. It's great that you care enough to be here or to be watching us on the internet here. This is a really exciting, actually, moment for our schools. It's been a bumpy 5 years, but I think that we have been recovering very well. I'm really excited to get behind Dr. Nolan. She's a fantastic leader, and I really like the vision that she's laid out for her schools. I'm honored to have won a lot of support in the city, a lot of support from the political folks, and especially from Chris Bresky, who I think has done a really good job leading the school committee. I'm eager to take the baton from Chris, thank him for his service, and carry it forward and keep on building the best school system in the state.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks everyone who's here and everyone who's joined us online. I'm an MPS alum. I'm the working mom of 2 current students, and I'm a public interest lawyer. I stepped up to run for school committee because I can help. I think I can help. That's my only motivation. I'm a first-time candidate. I have no political connections. I'm not interested in politics for politics' sake. I'm interested in this position for the students' sake. I come in with a deep commitment to the students in the schools of our city and a willingness to do the work. I also want to help us move away from this cycle of antagonizing and demonizing language that's been used, directed at some of our city officials, at our teachers, at other members of the community. We need to find a way to come together and solve the tough challenges that are ahead for Newton schools. I'd be honored to have your vote. Thank you.
Well, thank you for joining in this forum. I have learned a great deal about both of your campaigns. I think it's going to be a tough choice for voters out there, but I hope that voters come out, watch this forum, as well as go to your websites, because I think they're both very informative. So thank you.
Thank you, Amy.
Thanks, Amy.